A very warm welcome to the participants of the Proteomics Advanced Winter School 2021. Presented by Proteomics Lab, Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. Day 8, Protein Microarray. Lecture 1, Protein Microarray Applications.
So I'll give you a couple of short videos to show you the lab views of protein microarrays, and then I'll take you to the lab as well. A glimpse of some of the microarray applications which is possible on these arrays, and then we discuss about some group projects with all of you. So in the morning when we are discussing about some of the biosensors and other platforms, I think Asif mentioned about use of SPR, right? So at IT we did realize the need for these technologies, and not only the instrument but also to develop the new assays for the proteomics workflow. So we have set up the protein microarrays, which includes array for printing, include the scanner for scanning the slides and the software for data analysis part. Also, we have surface plasmon resonance by a core instrument, which can be used for protein drug interaction analysis. And as I said, not only we are interested into just these instruments, but also how to develop some assays which can be utilizing the integrative power of different technologies. For instance, just this small insect showing here in SPR, surface plasmon resonance, you are measuring the binding or kinetics of a given interaction, right? Now, let's say when we are looking at unknown interactions to happen, and we want to identify what is the interactor with which our protein is binding. So the amount of protein which is binding is very low actually for you to get any. So if you want to strip off that interactor, which is let's say protein X was known and protein Y is binding, which is unknown, and you want to identify what is this protein Y. So then you are going to try to analyze the data with mass spec, but the amount of peptide what is coming or proteins coming is very low. So we ran those samples into all the 4 flow cells in the SPR, and after doing repeat cycles for overnight, you are able to enrich those interactions. Then you can strip off these bound interactor, which you can now prepare the sample separately for the peptide analysis, run in the mass spec, and then I think you can identify the proteins with good confidence. So it means integration of the mass spectrometry based workflows for the protein identification along with the SPR biosensors to look for the unknown interactors identification. So that is possible if you couple these 2 technologies together. Likewise, we also looked into the SPR, how to utilize that, like ELISA. So in ELISA, you are measuring concentration of a given, let's say, serum protein, and you know what should be the level of that protein in the normal range, right? In SPR, can we do similar type of assays? And we first made the standard curve and things for known proteins of interest. This project we did on malaria, where we were looking at one of the protein, serum amyloid A protein, highly abundant in the patient serum samples. Can we now, we already had the ELISA measurements, can we also measure those on SPR with the calibration free concentration analysis, CFCA based analysis? So again, you can see like those kind of graphs are possible to detect using the SPR. And you have got some exposure of the cell-free expression arrays. We are also keen into looking at how best to utilize the cell-free systems to work on to the small panel of the arrays or protein arrays which can be utilized for some more functional analysis. So these are some of the setup what we have towards this end. But also I think the inclination is to utilize the power of different technologies and how best to do different type of innovative assays which can answer different biological questions. So let me show you this clip here, which is essentially a protein microarray. So this is a printer which can print these slides, and Arvio is going to show you this particular printer.
So this is a protein microarray printer. You can see the slides which are placed here, and this is basically the syringe which will contain the buffers. All the buffers and the proteins or the prepared proteins will be given here, and simultaneously with the help of the syringe, these slides will be printed one by one. This is kind of a robotic arm.
So this is still a small array, but if I just take you to this place, so here actually you have to see, like, how many plates you can keep for 384 well plates. Here you're going to clean up the pins. This is the robotic arm which will have 48 pins you can keep. It can go and get cleaned with a sonicator, and then you are going to, let's say 30-40 slides you can keep here. You're going to print those features on all of these slides. It will come and get it cleaned here in the washing solution. Take the contents again from your plates, go back and print it again, and then again go get cleaned. So in this manner, you can print small arrays easily with this type of array. But of course, if you want to do more high density printing, you have to have 96 pins and probably much more stacked different plates in the same printer, because you don't want to keep opening again and again. You want to maintain humidity and maintain vacuum and everything for doing this printing. Once you have done this printing, then you have done this experiment on the arrays where you can now add the patient serum sample, and you are looking for which are the autoantibodies you can detect on those. So on your glass slide, you can't see any signal, so you have to scan those slides. And this is one of the GenePix Pro scanner, which you can see how to scan the slides. All right, so there's a very small handy scanner which is quite specialized for different wavelength scanning. And what you get from those, you get to see these kind of images from the chip, that how the spots are getting expressed, what is the, depending on which dye you have used, which fluorophore you have used, you will see either red or green color. And in this case, we are looking at some protein expression of the chip with the GST. But let me show you the scanning parameters. So ideally, this is what you are placing is the grid on top of the scan slide, and grids contain all the information for your which spot is what protein, right? Because to start with itself, the entire layout of your chip, and which particular spot will be what protein. So unlike mass spec based system where everything you are going to subject to database to identify the proteins, in this case here you already know which protein is what. So if you know this is an interesting protein, you can actually just click on that, from the GAL file what that particular protein is. So this is actually an edge on the microarray technology, that you don't have to then again depend on that something looks interesting but you can't identify that and can't know the name of those proteins. And in this area, the spots are in duplicate in the adjacent, which is not correct, but still this array layout is like that. And you can see some of those are actually showing, uniform response. So I hope you are now getting tuned to look at microarray data. And I'm going to talk briefly about some microarray applications, although Sobo has spoken yesterday about the microarrays and some applications. I'm just showing you a couple of applications on the done in our lab on the cancer project and also malaria project. So in most of these projects, when we are looking at the patient serum sample, idea is that if it is autoimmune disorder, then of course you are very sure that there will be some autoantibodies being generated over there as a self antigens, which can be used for detection of the autoantibodies. But in cancer as well, there is hypothesis that it is possible that in response to the tumor cells, body's immune system start evoking the immune response and generates autoantibodies in the body quite ahead of time. So while the cancer may get apparent in 15-20 years, but the autoantibodies might be produced quite early. And because there are antibodies, these are quite stable as well. So you can actually detect their levels in the blood, plasma or serum samples quite ahead of time. So there are tests which can detect autoantibodies from the serum sample, which are unique to given cancer. This could be very strong and powerful way of taking the early detection strategies forward. And that's where protein microarrays has come forward as one of the strong platform for identification or the early detection of the biomarkers. In this case, we used HuProt arrays or human proteome arrays, where we collaborated with Hengyu from Johns Hopkins. And in this case, our goal was to look at the pure proteins being printed. So I just started that time, a couple of years ago. This part was done in the lab, and did not want to spend a lot of time optimization of the cell-free expression-based systems. I must warn you that cell-free expression-based arrays, which I spoke to you, is very simple and very elegant technology. I have done a lot of work on that in the past. But when it comes to the contents, the cell-free expression which you will buy from the vendors, that is, the quality of that is very, wavy. Many times you will have all type of quality. You have no idea how good or bad that is. And then your entire expression work will depend on the good quality of the in vitro transcription translation mix. If it comes in the thawed condition, or if it was thawed beforehand, you will not see any protein expression. So therefore, it's a lot of investment required actually to ensure that what the contents reagents you are getting, these are actually of the high quality, and therefore you can achieve the good expression quality. So, but if you can do that, then of course you are very good to start with the cell-free expression based method. But at this point, I was not willing to start that work. So I collaborated with Hengyu and his team from CDI lab in Johns Hopkins, and we procured these human proteome arrays, which at that time the first version had almost 17,000 human proteins printed in duplicate with around 40,000 spots. A lot of controls were there, and they have actually, so Hengyu, the same person which I showed you in my morning presentation, who worked with Mike Schneider earlier as a postdoc, and that time they made these proteome arrays. And eventually, as an independent investigator, Hengyu took over the human proteome arrays project, and now he's developing these HuProt chips, which is quite a big project. And these are all purified proteins. So think about protein expression and purification of human proteins. All of those in the with the protein purification way is quite tedious, right? But they have all the setup which I have seen in their labs is all robotic, all automated, and everything in 96 well plate format. But still, the protein expression being confirmed, as you can see in the panel A, with the silver stain, that these proteins are actually pure, and you don't see much contamination from the other protein bands. So they do a lot of QC check as well to ensure that these proteins which is being purified, they are expressing well and they are stored well, and a lot of aliquots of batches are to be made. So this is actually, you can assume it is a huge operation to create that level of number of proteins and store them and keep purifying them and make them multiple batches. But this is actually still good resource for all of you to know. And some of you who are planning to do small projects, rather than investing time into developing your own arrays, I think it might be wise strategy to buy these kind of arrays and do something which will be really big. Only thing is, if your experimental design is good, even the 10 arrays can give you so much data. Think about you are generating 40,000 data points of something which you cannot detect from the mass spec or other type of platforms. You are looking at autoantibodies. So now this data can itself be very powerful for you to find out, narrow down your leads, and then you can subsequently develop the ELISA or other type of test. So even with a small investment of some chips, carefully planning the experiment, you can actually still proceed with the protein arrays based work. If you scan the slides, you don't have a scanner, you please send to us. We'll be happy to scan it. It will be stable for at least several weeks to month if you store them properly in the dark condition and with the proper drying condition. So I'm just giving you some practical tips that I'm not just talking here for the sake of showing that what we can do, but what I'm really trying to encourage you that what you can do. You can do without having access to any of the huge setup here. You just buy the chip from these places, do the experiment like Western blot in your labs, get the slides dried, and then you can collaborate with the facility who has the scanner, scan the slides, and you can analyze the data. So you can actually generate high quality data with some small effort. So in this case, we were looking at can we use autoantibody screening on human proteome arrays for cancer? And there are some previous investigation on the breast cancer and ovarian cancer, which have shown that in the cancer as well, the autoantibodies can be produced, and one could screen those on the arrays. And we had done some similar work on the NAPA in the past as well. But here the context was slightly challenging. I was working on the brain tumors at IIT Bombay, and we thought we had 200 or so patient serum sample. These patients were of different grades of tumor. Some are healthy individual or normal, and some are grade 1 to 3 of gliomas, and GBM glioblastoma multiforme grade 4. And likewise, we had few patients of meningioma different grades, grade 1, 2, and 3. An idea was, can we make an effort to look for are there autoantibodies in these tumors as well. So the top panel here on the right side. So these ones are the patient design, for different grades of the patient. The serum samples are being collected. This is a typical protein array based experimental workflow when you have the patient sample which contains antibodies which you are incubating here, either the cerebrospinal fluid or the serum, which contains the antibody from the patients. And then once they are bound over there, then you are adding the secondary antibody for signal detection. And these are conjugated with either Cy3 or Cy5, or you can use Terramite signal amplification system with the HRP label as well. Now the right panel here shows the protein expression, and these are the GST purified proteins which one could see as a gradient, that with increasing amount of protein, you can detect the better signal. So these are throughout on the arrays. And then one is also looking at the, so the same chip, we are first adding the, let's say Cy3, and then you add Cy5, because you can now do the multiplexing on the same chip. You can look for the anti-GST Cy3 conjugated, when you can look at the only GST protein expression. Or if you're looking at IgG response, you can now look for the immunoglobulin tagged with the Cy3 or Cy5, and you can look for their response as well. So on the same chip, you are identifying the protein expression, using that information to lay the grid. And then the second, say subsequently the same chip, you are also incubating with the IgG, and you are using it for the autoantibody response, which now you can use the same chip and the same layout for identifying where you can see IgG response. So this is some layout and the experimental plan, but again, a lot of these things, as I mentioned, if you're doing at a high throughput scale, you have to do many quality control checks, and we were looking at variety of reproducibility of different arrays, different days of arrays, different people processing, variability, all of those. And then I emphasize the need for looking at positive and negative controls in these high density arrays. You should make sure that you have variety of control spots which you are going to look into, that in controls it should not show up like this one, and in the grades this protein should show up. Those will work as a positive control in this case here. Some blank spots or the buffer can use as the negative controls. And also you can have the series of immunoglobulin IgG printed, which can also always serve as a for immunoassay positive control. So many of these things has to be embedded in your arrays, and on these arrays there are a variety of control spots are there. As per the experimental requirement, you can make use of those. Another positive control spot here. Yeah, but you want to always see something like this in your given grade. You have these duplicate spots are showing a robust signal, and the control they're not showing the response or very weak response. But so now come to the actual project. So we thought to use these arrays for after doing many of the QC check. Dr. Parvez Sayyed, he was one of the postdoc that time. He did this work on the glioma patients, and so they looked into all the intra-chip, inter-chip reproducibility, and now we had a big project of 200 patients to screen. These are controls, grade 2, grade 3, and grade 4. Grade 4 is the highest grade of the brain tumor of the glioblastoma multiforme. Experiment goes in the same workflow of block the slides, incubate with the patient serum, look for the human IgG conjugated with secondary, with the side eye, and then scan the slide. So after a lot of work, this was the first time which anybody was trying on the brain tumor or the gliomas. We had no idea what we will get out of it. Our thought was that with the at least grade 4 we should be able to see some autoantibodies, and we did find many actually. But what was very surprising, at the low grade we had very few autoantibody signature which we could see, only 6. Grade 3 had highest number, and grade 4 has higher but not the highest. So main thing was that of all these protein, only 4 came common, which were showing common response significantly from grade 2, 3, and 4. And these 4 were actually quite interesting because shown here in the inset and panel here, like sorting Nexin 1 protein, for example, going from control to grade 2, grade 3, and grade 4, you can see the signal is keep increasing. Similarly, IgG1 protein, you can see the signal is increasing. So some of these proteins can be very interesting early detection markers because, so think about, there are too many proteins which we found, and we are talking about 40,000 or so features to screen. From there, after narrowing down grade wise, we can get these many, and only 4 showed common response, which is showing the linear increase or decrease. One thing that's very interesting here that we were not sure why we found so less number of autoantibody in the low grade, but while talking to clinicians, we realized that in the glioma, there is a blood-brain barrier there in the brain tumors, and with the higher grades, with grade 3 and grade 4, the blood-brain barrier is getting breached, and a lot of proteins are getting infiltrated in the blood at that time, and that is the possible reason why in the grade 2, when the blood-brain barrier is still quite intact, we have less number of autoantibody as compared to grade 3, which is quite aggressive now, and many autoantibodies have leached out. And then in the grade 4, most of the time now things are getting shut down with, patients are really at the dying stage. Not too much response we can see. So it was quite mimicking the actual patient's, trajectory based on the clinician's input as well. So we were very happy with this information. And some of these protein, as you can see, after a lot of hard work, only few which showed the trend which looks interesting. But while doing this kind of analysis, then that's where the network and pathway analysis comes into the play. We analyzed the entire data and we looked at how the grade wise we can see the disease progression happening. So let's say in the grade 2, we could find some GPCR signaling pathways and smooth muscle contraction, some of these pathways based on these protein markers. Those were quite upregulated. And as the disease was progressing from grade 2 and 3, we could see that on the intersection of grade 2 and 3, there are some proteins which are showing change. And as the disease is progressing to grade 3, only few proteins are now showing change. So there is a lot of proteins which are actually on the interface of grade 2 and 3, where the disease is now progressing from grade 2 and grade 3. And that's where I think most of the important signaling cascades, whether TGF or Wnt signaling or cytoskeletal remodeling, integrin, all of these are actually getting change very adversely at this point when the grade 2 and 3 transition is happening. So many of these proteins which are part of this data could actually be very good target for identifying the right transitions and may be used for the potential therapeutics as well. Then similarly, when we look into grade 3, moving to grade 3 and 4, now things are very few proteins are showing change. And towards the grade 4 now, almost shutting down. So it was really interesting that grade 2 and 3 interface was most interesting part where a lot of biology is involved, and one should try to dig deeper and investigate further this part in the grade 2-3 interface. Likewise, we were also looking at a subset of these patients for which we had the sequencing information for the IDH mutation, and IDH is of course very important mutation when you are looking at the Krebs cycle and looking at the involvement of isocitrate dehydrogenase. But this became more apparent with the Nature paper when they showed that IDH mutation was very common in these GBM patients, and that really catered everybody's interest. And looking at these patients who were having, we got radiological images for these patients and found that some patients are having the tumor very close to ventricle region, and in some patients it's quite far apart. So these were termed as the SVZ positive, subventricular zone region positive. They were quite aggressive tumor, and these patients will die in 3 to 6 months time. Whereas these tumors like SVZ negative, when tumor is slightly far apart from the ventricle region, they were less aggressive. These can go slightly more, but not too much, maybe 1 to 2 years. But even location of tumor is actually quite important. So based on this part, we looked at, are there subset of autoantibodies which are different in this group of patient versus this group of patient. These are all GBM, glioblastoma multiforme patient only. And only one protein we could find that which was actually different in these two groups, NED9 protein, which we also did validation with ELISA, and that looked like a nice prognostic marker to convey that maybe these patients might be better for the less aggressive, and they could be surviving longer. And similarly, we looked into the prognostic nature for the IDH1 mutation only on a subset of patients for which we had sequencing data available, and we could identify two proteins like STUB1 and YWH-AH protein, which showed differential response in wild type and IDH mutants. So again, once you have these biology, you can always go back to those data set and reanalyze the data, or you might have performed the new experiments, but you can actually dig deeper into the biology and find out what is happening at the proteome wide scale. Since we were doing this experiment and we had a similar type of brain tumor, not the glioma origin, but now this time a meningioma origin. So these are the meninges of the in the brain from where tumor is arising. So we collected serum and CSF samples of these patients. Of course, we had the tumor as well, tumor tissue as well, which we did other project on the mass spec. But we were looking at the serum or cerebrospinal fluid. So two PhD students, Sholena was working on the serum part and Nikita on the CSF part. So after looking at these profile of these individuals, it turned out to be that IGHG4, one of the protein, I showed you IGHG1 here, if you recall, this was actually showing up regulation in the gliomas and glioblastoma multiforme GBM. Whereas IGHG4, another IG family variant, is showing opposite response. It is quite high in the normal, whereas it's going totally depleted in the grade 1 and grade 2 of meningioma patient. So that is pretty interesting that even within IGH family, there are proteins which are showing differential responses, and those then are quite unique and specific. These are not generic response, right? That's where comparing data from different type of disease itself is an important strategy when you are analyzing your data, not only controls, because controls are very different. If you can also compare your disease with other disease type, similar disease samples, those will be quite powerful analysis. So again, this was interesting observation, and we also looked into that what we are finding with the tissue proteomics data from these patients versus what we are finding with autoantibodies. Are there some protein which are showing common correlation with the eye track data along with the autoantibody data? And there were some actually like selenium binding protein and TPD52, which were showing quite uniform response, which we did some Western blot as well. So now you can see like different technologies you have to start bringing together to address these questions. Just last one slide on the malaria now. So while we were doing this work, this was on the human proteome model that I showed you. We got a collaborator from Seattle, Dr. Pradeep Rathore. He and some collaborators from California, they had made this chip of the falciparum and Vivax malaria. This is actually the Plasmodium chip, where many of the genes of these pathogens were printed on these arrays on the nitrocellular membrane. And we in this collaboration we got these arrays and do the experiment where we had the patient population from Goa, almost 97 falciparum malaria and 103 Vivax malaria patient. And we could actually look for, it was somebody, first time we were looking at this kind of thing. We could find very unique, distinct signature of P. vivax and P. falciparum, looking at the entire immune response, humoral immune response, and several protein which came forward. Many of them are actually pretty good candidates towards the vaccine development as well. Likewise, from this particular project, we were also quite interested to address other questions like, is there surveillance of antigen response we can do with the age-based population survey? So, same data now being analyzed in different manner, that how we have different age group patients like, pediatric 0 to 10 or up to, 60 or 70 years. And we could actually see that, there are very distinct signatures which is emerging in the older population. And when we compared the patient with the non-severe and severe response, then we could see very clear distinct response. So there are a lot of different antigens which are involved in the protective mechanism. So you can actually get a huge amount of information from these type of experiments, and of course at the scale which is very different at the proteome wide scale, genome wide scale, which is quite powerful, right? So just to summarize the presentation, I think I hope in today's various presentation and yesterday after listening Professor Sobu's presentation, you agree that protein arrays provide a very strong platform for interactomics and biomarker discovery, and it also adds some new, it provides you with a new ARM tool to look into the different aspects which is not possible with other mass spectrometry and other proteomics technology. So you have to think about some of these experiments which can only be done on the protein arrays. A lot of immune response analysis and different type of investigation for autoantibodies and even humoral immune response. These are possible on these arrays, and one could actually easily monitor disease severity responses based on the immune signaling. And of course, I just gave you flavor of few disease. Yesterday, you have seen the some application from Sobo, and you also heard today Alok Patel talking about the SARS-CoV-2 arrays. So variety of clinical applications can be addressed. I think, you have to just think little bit innovative way how best you can utilize these resources and technologies in your own research, right? That's pretty much it. So I hope you're all excited that you are learning some new proteomics tools and technologies. Let me take you to the lab quickly, just to give you the lab tour for the array technologies briefly, which I have showed you the video, but I'll just walk you through. And then we will have a little bit your troubleshooting steps for the your data analysis part of the network analysis before you get ready for the next session of Reactome. But I'm also going to talk to you about some more activities. So let's stay tuned. Let me go to the lab and I'll connect you on the different lab tour. Just please give me 2 minutes time. All right, so let me unshare my screen. Okay, so it's nothing very new or very exciting, but we'd like to show you that these arrays, what I'm talking is the simple microscopic slide, what you have been seeing in your different cell biology experiments. But we are showing you one of the HuProt arrays, human proteome arrays. So Arjo, please give this demo now.
So like what you can see, these are basically the glass slides in which around 20,000 proteins have been spotted, which is occurring in the human proteome. What we generally do, we take the primary antibodies or whatever antibodies we are screening, we incubate in this kind of antibody boxes, pouring the solvent, and after that we wash it. We wash it with the desired solvents, means whatever the washing solvents you are using. So you can see like this, you can do a incubation. So you can see like these are the tweezers or the experiments which have been done. You can incubate also in the particular antibody or the washing bubble, and you just have to switch it on. It will happen, but remain.
So setup is very much like Western blot, as you will say, right? It is not very different. Only thing is you have to think about what is the objective. Are you looking at patient serum sample autoantibodies? You're looking at protein interactors, purified protein, or you're looking at any primary antibody for screening.
So once the screening have been done, like once the incubation have been done, this is GenePix Pro, one of the state-of-art technology. So you can find this GenePix Pro. This is the inner view, and the lasers are located in the bottom. You can place the slides here. You can place these slides in the scanner, upside right down. So once it gets snugly fit, you can close it. Now you can take the reading from the software. So you can find like these are the antibody spots in the duplicates, correct, which have been identified. So like this kind of antibody spots now can be detected, and individually you will go and see. Individually you can go and see like which antibodies are present here.
All right. So after this, you have to extract the data and export the data, and then you get the big data file in Excel, and you have to do different ways of analysis. Many strategies which we have been speaking about, looking at different negative control spots, how much intensity they have. Do you want to subtract that? How to normalize your data set? You have to follow these things in the micro data as well, and then finally you will look for your fold changes and the intensity expression value, right? All right, so short lab tour. With this now, let me hand over this to Dr. Arup. He can ask all of you if you have any questions for the previous session for the network analysis. So let's spend a couple of minutes on this. Then I'd like to interact with all of you again for some other points. Arup, are you there? Can you take over?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Yeah. So good evening to all of you. So you had your files. So can we just go through again for the network analysis part? And if anybody had any specific questions, that can also come up for discussion.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
So what is the minimum number of entries I should use for this kind of analysis?
There is no minimum number, but basically whether you are trying to build a network, ideally anything, it should be more than 15 or 20, something, at least a decent amount that can go for an enrichment. If you put even two gene names, you won't get any enrichment. So
yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
it's like it won't come up with any, it won't give any result, right?
Yes.
So let me share my screen. Last time we were here. But can you see?
Now we can see.
Right. So I had told you that. So there is. Hello. Yeah, that's right. So if I click on analysis report page, it will take you to a new file, to a new page. And what we basically get there is a zip. So we were here. So you can see it will also generate list in 3 different formats. One is the gene list report Excel sheets. Then there is a gene list report PowerPoint file and the all-in-one zip file. Let's see what is there. So if I click on the gene list report Excel sheet, it will open an Excel sheet. Let's see what is happening. Okay. So you see here you start getting biological sense of the data. First of all, this was the input list name. Then it has converted it into a gene ID, and it has told that my input name is in UniProt. Taxonomy is Homo sapiens. So this is the gene symbol, and then they have come up with the name of the genes. So all these gene names, which was previously numbers and alphanumeric codes, you will get a mapping of all the genes it could. So if you remember, we had taken 256, and you would see there are in few cases it could not map on any. So these are these are empty cells it could not map on. Ideally, what you can do is you can just copy this ID and you can go to your favorite web server and you can just write UniProt. So it's not that the protein does not exist. The protein is this, the immunoglobulin kappa constant gene. But it's only that in the Metascape analysis, this particular protein ID was not mapped onto any pathway. Now, if you click on the tab enrichment, you would see another interesting thing. So let me just, right. So you come up with, this is called the summary pathway, and these are the member pathways. So if you see for one summary pathway, there are almost 256 member pathways. And each of these member pathways are ranked in the order of log P and log Q value, which basically means that, so if we talk of metabolism of RNA, this is the most enriched of all. So this is my summary pathway is metabolism of RNA, and under that there are multiple reactome pathways and gene ontology pathways like mRNA catabolic process, RNA catabolic process, cellular organic cycling and compound catabolic process, and which are the genes that are mapping. You will get an idea of that as well. So these are the genes that are forming a part of this. And how many genes are we getting? 61. So in this particular pathway, there are almost 673 member proteins. Out of these 673, 61 was in our data set. So that is why this pathway is enriched. So this is what, and likewise, you can get it for all the pathways. So you can go down to all the pathways. So almost, if you see, there are 660, this is cell number 663. And there are so many pathways. That's why I was telling that we should also have our eyes and ears open as to what is our biological question, because this is a software generated feed which tries to give you an idea. So one thing, you can just go and options filter. So these are the summary pathways, and this shows the number of proteins. So these are all the proteins that got mapped. Now, if you want to go into individual pathways, you can go. So metabolism of RNA, regulated exocytosis, VGFR2 signaling pathway, signaling by roboreceptors. So all these are pathways that got enriched, and this is from the Excel output. Now, if I want to click on the PPT, so it will give me an analysis report in PowerPoint format. So just let's wait for it to download. In the meanwhile, you can have questions. You can just ask me.
Manage the data wrangling until you start reaching the point to access the XML maker. Still, I would like to continue listening, but not right now because for it I'm not in a rush. So yes.
Hello.
All right, Arup.
Yeah.
You want to show anything else, or can I just talk now to the participants?
A bit more. I would have just showed him the analysis report, how it comes up.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the analysis report. This is a PowerPoint that is again. So it gives you a brief summary that we had 251 identifiers. If you remember, we had started off with 256, but we could only map 251 with the human interest gene IDs, and then it gives you how they have come up with this. These are the figures that you can directly. So this is an open source software. You can give them the proper citation. You can use these figures on your publications as well. So all these PowerPoint basically explains to you how the study was done, what was the algorithm applied, and if you really need to know more about it, you have to download the all-in-one zip file. So, and the entire analysis can be downloaded. So it's a pretty large file, around 11 MB of analysis. This can be downloaded, and you can start playing with your own data. You can just start playing with this data set and try to understand. So in this, you will have so the same Metascape result that we found in Excel, the analysis report in PowerPoint file, and then all these individual enrichment, the QC enrichment, the protein-protein interaction enrichment, the gene ontology enrichment, all these analysis are in separate folders. So you can use it, archive this file. Once you are done with your analysis, you can archive and keep all the raw data, all the calculations with you for long-term keeping. Suppose you're working on a project, so you can keep this entire analysis with you, and you can go back to your raw files and check what was the actual data set that you are working on, what were the points you came back. So this is a good way to even have all your data with you. Now you don't have to wait for the server, because this server automatically deletes all your data after 72 hours. So that's about it. If you have problems, you can put your questions on the chat box.
Great. All right. Thank you very much, Arup. So, for the pathways and network analysis, we have now the expert,